I'd like to start this last session by again going back into the shamatha practice. That's the practice we're going to be focusing on tomorrow in the text as well. And shamatha practice, again, the goal is to cultivate a calm, clear, focused mind. We're cultivating these three qualities of relaxation, stability, clarity. So relaxation is the basis. On that basis, we work on improving stability. So for that, we focused on the abdomen in the last session. And now we're going to move to clarity, trying to improve clarity of attention. And for this, it can be helpful to focus on the breath at the entrance of the nostrils. We bring the attention up, and it's a much smaller object. And when I say focus at the entrance of the nostrils, I mean anywhere in this area, which means you can focus either at the actual entrance of the nostrils, or you can focus on this little area above the upper lip, whichever you find easier. So anywhere in this area here. And with this practice, there is very much a habit of tensing, because it's a little bit harder to focus, so we'll tense. So keep an eye on the tension. If you're tensing the body or mind, just relax, relax, relax. And also, if we don't notice much here, there can be a tendency of forcing the breath, breathing more forcefully, so we can pick up sensations here, so we don't want to do that either. So let's do that practice before we go back to the text. And also in this practice, like the last one, if you find yourself distracted a lot and you find it helpful, you can bring in some counting the breath. Or if you prefer, you can do what's called noting the breath. So instead of counting, you're noting, breathing in, breathing out, or simply in, out. If you don't find counting or noting helpful, just leave it out. Okay? So let's do the practice. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. and setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Simply become aware of the rhythm of the breath. Now narrow your focus and focus on the sensations of the breath at the entrance of the nostrils. So you can focus either at the actual entrance of the nostrils or the small area above the upper lip. Just focus on the sensations as the breath passes over this area. Keeping the body and the mind completely relaxed. allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly, not trying to force or control the breath in any way. If you're finding that you're constantly becoming distracted, and if you find it helpful, you might like to introduce some counting or noting of the breath to help stabilize the attention. let's go back into the text. So, again, in this text, three main parts: the preliminaries, actual practice, and conclusion. So we covered the preliminaries this morning in terms of the four common preliminaries for practice in general, and then those four uncommon preliminaries that are preliminaries to the Tantra level of practice. And then we've just briefed now had a look at the Tantra level of Mahamudra practice. And in fact, in this last session, we saw that in particularly the Kagyu tradition of Mahamudra, they even talk about 3 levels of Mahamudra. So in this text, we're mainly just talking about 2 levels, Sutra Mahamudra and Tantra Mahamudra. But in the Kagyu tradition of Mahamudra, often they add a 3rd level, this Essence Mahamudra. So remember, Sutra Mahamudra is these 2 standard practices of Shamatha Vipassana. So Shamatha we're going to be looking at tomorrow, and then Vipassana is the main topic for the weekend next year. So because it's Mahamudra, then in both Shamatha and Vipassana, we are focusing on the mind. So tomorrow, when we look at the Shamatha practice, we'll look at instructions on how to focus on the mind as the object for Shamatha practice. Today, of course, we've been using the breath, probably one of the most common objects used in general in Buddhism. But tomorrow, when we look in the text here, the Shamatha, we'll get instructions on, and we'll practice that in the meditations tomorrow, how to use the mind as the object of Shamatha practice. And then the Vipassana practice in Sutra Mahamudra is to come to realize the empty nature of our mind, to realize the emptiness of our own mind. And then, of course, in Tantra Mahamudra, in the previous session we saw that here, through the generation and completion stage practice, we are trying to gain access to this very subtle level of our mind and use this to realize emptiness, and we can thereby accelerate the spiritual path to enlightenment. And then in the Kagyu tradition, they sometimes add this 3rd level, Essence Mahamudra, which generally are these 2 practices. First, the pointing out instruction, where the master would provide some short, pithy instruction to the disciple to cause the mind of the disciple to break through, to realize the nature of the mind, to break through to the very subtle mind. And then the non-meditation instructions on how to sustain that state, how to keep resting in that state, not to pop out of that state. So these are the 3 levels that sometimes are mentioned. So now we're going to look at Sutra Mahamudra. So remember, in the Sutra Mahamudra, there's the 2 main practices of Shamatha and Vipassana. So if we go to page 2 towards the bottom, it says, Sutra Mahamudra refers to ways of meditating on emptiness as directly indicated in the 3 mothers. They are the extensive, middling and brief Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And then there's a quote from Nagarjuna. He says, as said by Supreme Arya Nagarjuna, there is no path to liberation other than this. Here I shall give instructions on Mahamudra in accordance with his thought and describe ways to introduce the nature of the mind in accordance with the instructions of the lineage masters. So here this word emptiness is a translation of the Sanskrit term shunyata. And shunyata actually is coming from the root shunya, which actually means 0. So 0 in terms of hollow, no core, no essence. So emptiness is actually a very good translation of shunyata. And emptiness, again, and we'll talk, of course, this is the main topic for next year's weekend, is the fact that everything is empty of independent existence. Nothing exists independently. So emptiness is not saying nothing really exists. We're just interested in how it exists. And now everything appears to exist independently from its own side. But if we investigate, we'll come to realise that everything is empty of independent existence. Nothing exists independently. That's emptiness. So here he says Sutra Mahamudra is the practice of meditating on emptiness as directly indicated in the three mothers. So this is 3 of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So what's called the second turning of the wheel of Dharma of the Buddha. He taught these Perfection of Wisdom sutras, these teachings, mainly in an area called Rajgir, not far from Bodh Gaya, where he achieved enlightenment. And 3 of the well-known Perfection of Wisdom Sutras are these, what are called the 3 mothers, the extensive, middling and brief. So the extensive Perfection of Wisdom Sutra is a Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 100,000 stanzas. The middling is 25,000 stanzas, and the brief is only 8,000 stanzas long. Of course, the most famous Perfection of Wisdom Sutra is the Heart Sutra, which is 25 stanzas long. So very brief. Now, these Perfection of Wisdom teachings, the main subject matter was emptiness, not so easy to understand. And then in the 2nd century, we have great Indian master Nagarjuna, who wrote his classic text called Mula Madhyamika Karika in Sanskrit, or often in English called The Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, where he described this idea of emptiness that the Buddha taught in these Perfection of Wisdom teachings. And it's through Nagarjuna that we have the philosophical system called Madhyamika being formed in India, in ancient India. And Madhyamika literally means the middle way. So here in this philosophical system, they are asserting this idea of emptiness as taught by the Buddha, of course, in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and as explained by Nagarjuna, and then also later great Indian masters like Chandrakirti, Shantideva, Buddha Palita, and so forth. And it says here that Nagarjuna says, there is no path to liberation other than this, meaning the only way we can achieve liberation from suffering, achieve nirvana or enlightenment, is if we realise emptiness. Because the fundamental ignorance that is the root cause of our suffering, is grasping onto things existing independently. So if we want to overcome that fundamental ignorance that is the root of our mental afflictions and suffering, we need to come to realise emptiness. This is what he's saying. And so here the Panchen Lama is saying, here I shall give instructions on Mahamudra in accordance with his thought, with Nagarjuna's understanding, and describe ways to introduce the nature of the mind. So the nature of the mind here is the emptiness of the mind, in accordance with the instructions of the lineage masters. So lineage masters after Nagarjuna, of course, include Buddha Palita, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, and then, of course, into Tibet, Lama Tsongkhapa, and so forth. And then he says, why is that which is taught here called Mahamudra? So here again we see the etymology of the word Mahamudra. It's quoting a sutra, the King of Concentration Sutra, which says, the nature of all phenomena is a seal. In that way, since emptiness is the nature of all phenomena, it is a seal, or mudra is the Sanskrit. And since when it is realised, one is liberated from all degenerations, it is great, or supreme, which is Maha. So therefore, emptiness is the great seal because it enables us to achieve the great goal of liberation from suffering. Hence, Mahamudra. Everything okay so far? Any questions so far? Okay, we'll just continue then. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. So then it says, there are many lineages of practice, each one having their own unique name, such as, and here he gives a long list of practices of emptiness in the sutra level, and the first one is the co-emergent union. And so this is, within the Kagyu tradition, I said that the Mahamudra instructions came from India to Tibet through Tilopa and Naropa, who then passed it to Mapa, the translator, Tibetan, whose main disciple was Milarepa, who then passed it on to Gampopa. And Gampopa systematized these Mahamudra instructions together with synthesizing that with the Lam Rim instructions coming from Lama Atisha, and we have the Kagyu school being formed. So Gampopa is said to be the founder of the Kagyu school. More correctly, what's called the Dakpo Kagyu. And then through his disciples, he had a number of disciples, then you have a number of different sub-schools of the Kagyu tradition being formed. One of his main disciples was Dusum Kempa, who's often referred to as the first Karmapa. And so, of course, that started the lineage of what's called the Karma Kagyu. And of course, the head of the Karma Kagyu is the Karmapa. But also then we have other disciples, particularly one of his main disciples was Pagmo Drukma, and he had a number of disciples, and from that we have a number of other Kagyu schools being formed. Drikung Kagyu, Drupka Kagyu, and there are a couple of others, but they don't, I think, exist anymore. There's one other Kagyu lineage that exists called Shangpa Kagyu, but Shangpa Kagyu is not really coming from Gampopa. I said that the main lineage of Mahamudra coming from India to Tibet was through Tilopa and Naropa. So that's through Gampopa, Milarepa Gampopa. But also, contemporary with Tilopa and Naropa, there was another great Indian Mahasiddha, Maitripa, who also passed instructions down. And we have also through Tilopa, he has, I think it was his sister, maybe, or not sure if it what relation.